Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pack Unleashed.
Ooh.
We got a good one, haven't we, guys? I am with my co-hosts Matt and Dominic. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the value of design. Design! Yeah, it's so valuable right now. So guys, when I say design, are we talking about the colouring in bit of something?
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's my favourite bit.
That's my
That's what we
definition,
do,
right?
right?
That's my we just colour stuff in, yeah? Okay, cool. I guess that's done then.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Tune in next week.
Yeah, mic drop.
Thanks for a great podcast.
You may have been able to decipher that there was a hint of sarcasm within that last 30 seconds. That is because no, design is not the colouring in bit. But that's cool because it's not everybody knows that. So we're going to talk a little bit about...
I can understand why people do think it's like that. But
historically, yeah, that's how it's been perceived within organisations. It's the bit where everything's been worked out and you know what you're making or building or whatever, and then it's time to apply the design layer.
You see, that's where it goes wrong. That's the thing. It's where people think they're ready to go into giving it a little bit of colour.
Giving it a little bit of colour.
Actually, that's often where things go wrong.
Exactly. So we're talking about design in the wider sense of design.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, yeah.
We've moved on. Matt was getting scared.
Thank God. I thought it was going to be another one of those circle jerk design podcasts all over again.
Let's talk about new Photoshop filters.
Oh.
No, we're going to talk about the wider sense of design, why it matters, what it means to run a design-led business, and how in the hell can you sell design into your business if you know it's important? So that is what we're going to be talking about. If you do not want to miss that, stick around. All right.
Says Arnie himself. I'm definitely staying now.
I'm glad he's also in the room. We didn't even introduce him. Sorry, Arnie.
Design calling.
So, John, what do you guys think it means to be a design-led company? Because I think there's a lot of press about that kind of thing now. And I think it's interesting to find out what people's different definitions are.
It is, yeah. I mean, you've got popularized kind of design terms, coined by... people like IDEO and the kind of D School and stuff like design sprints that are taking the kind of strategic side of design commercially led. And you've got companies like Apple and Airbnb, to name a few, who are kind of adopting this kind of design-led approach. But what does it mean to be design-led? Well, Matthew, let me answer that question for you this very moment.
that was the biggest walk around the garden ever heard.
Someone gave a lead.
What does it mean to be a design-led business? It means this. It means that you are putting your users at the center of the business. You're putting your customers at the center of the business, and you are designing and building solutions collaboratively to come up with solutions that are customer focused.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Surely every business should be like that.
Every business should be like that. Is every business like that, Dominic? No. That's a resounding no from the board. So, why isn't every business like that?
Yeah, for me, I think look, realistically, a lot of businesses don't start up necessarily thinking they're going to get to where they're going. A lot of the times, there'll be an individual inventor that will come up with a product that kind of is set to change the world. And then all of a sudden there's big investment, the company scales, maybe they sell a lot of the product. And, I've known small businesses that have like a single bit of IP that have suddenly turned over £1 million in a couple of years. And they've never thought about the design of their business or the way that they talk to customers, or even they filled a very specific need. And I think that takes you to a certain level. But then when you want to turn that into something that scales up and becomes a business that lasts, that you have to start thinking about how you design your business around your customers and the users.
Yeah, I suppose there's like a level of maturity that comes, isn't there, with a product, from when you first conceive it to where it ultimately ends up.
Yeah. And also, like you said, companies don't always know where they're going. So therefore they don't know what, let's face it, like all companies, no matter how big or small you are kind of making it up as they go along. You're making decisions as you go along. Like there's no hard and fast rules. You can follow a framework. You can do this, that, and the other. But usually in the first instance to build a company, you have to, build it up, sell it, get people in, people change. There's just all kinds of factors that can mean that you don't particularly put as much emphasis on the design side of things as you potentially should be. So how can turning your business into a design-led business transform things for you?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to really understanding, in my mind, the real world value of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And that, like we've just said, comes from better understanding your users, better understanding your competition, working better together, there are better ways to work, I think, than a lot of people are currently doing. And in my mind, that's what we come and help do.
I guess, thinking about design as a kind of weapon in your arsenal as a business, does design give you, a competitive advantage over businesses that don't lead with design?
Absolutely. I think you can have a really good business that doesn't lead with design. I think there's lots of businesses that make a lot of money that do really well, and they don't have a design thinking approach or a user-centric approach. They have a very good product. It's a niche. It does well.
Yeah.
It's really good. However, if somebody then comes into their market that does really think about the user, understands how to communicate with them, understands how to pinpoint what type of jobs their users are trying to do and how they can frame their products and services to really support and help empower and give them value, then that can give them a massive competitive advantage, which you see a lot of the time. And I think with some of the design-led companies, or the companies that are talked about as being design-led, they are the ones that have come in and disrupted an existing industry or an old school kind of business that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Like Uber, for instance, with London taxis, right? London taxis, great. They've had the medallions, Hackney Carriages goes back hundreds of years into London. And then, Uber came along and looked at what does somebody want when they're traveling within a city and they want to be able to grab a car straight away. They don't want to have to worry about cash and they want to know it's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because design businesses usually work leaner, faster, and just generally are able to pivot and disrupt on their offering and keep iterating on what they do based on customer needs compared to some of these less design-led businesses.
It's a mindset. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say though, just to reiterate your point, is just that I feel it's not just about doing customer research, because everyone can kind of do that. And I think that's where there's the tendency for everyone to just kind of just do the same thing. But it's more about understanding what's missing and the real need and like being able to put yourself in that real world situation and fully understand it and like find that gap. And that is where you're going to get the most like innovation from. I've got a quick example.
Dom's example.
So this is a prime example of that sort of thing. So you sort of said about Uber kind of being the one who they kind of spotted a sort of an issue within the kind of transportation
disruptor.
And they kind of came in and they disrupted the way that people work. And there's a product that came out and it was meant to be, it was being touted as like the next biggest invention, past the car sort of thing. It was like, it's meant to sort of like Uber did, like revolutionize the way people got around inner cities. And they didn't announce specifically what it was. It was just meant to be this like amazing piece of technology. And they started building all of this hype and loads of big brands were getting behind it and saying like really great things about it. Really smart people were also really supporting it, even though no one really fully knew what it was. So you can imagine like when it actually launched, people were like super excited to be there, like they are at like Apple events.
Yeah.
It was basically invented by a guy called Dean Kamen back in 2001. And the product itself was, like we were talking about earlier, the Segway.
The Segway.
the new way to get around town. And basically, this was touted as being something, a new product that was basically going to be worth at least a kind of £1 billion turnover a year. This is what the professionals were predicting, selling sort of 10,000 units a week, which is a lot, really, considering it was a new thing to come out. And what they actually ended up selling was 30,000 units, but not in a week, over a 6-year period. It was an utter fail, basically. And they just sort of failed to fully understand, like, they felt like they understood there was a need there, and there was like a smarter way to get around.
Well, I think the whole e-scooter thing is like completely validated that there's a need for people to have some kind of motorized,
exactly. But the benefit of that,
low profile travel solution.
It's totally true. And the benefit of that is, until people started dying, was that there was a need.
There's that.
There was a need. I mean, not to point out, but the guy, Jim Hendelson, who was actually the owner of Segway, died on a Segway, which is quite bad.
No, he rode it off a cliff.
Yeah, he rode it off.
Dom says that's quite bad.
It's very bad. I mean, and it doesn't support the product particularly well.
No, or do him any good.
But the other thing as well, like, so there was a lot of issues with that. The price point was too much. It was between $6,000 and $8,000 to purchase one.
Jeez.
And they didn't realise, think about, to get around the inner city, what's wrong with a bike? It costs like a fraction of the price. Think about bikers, you can take it on a bus, you can take it on a train. Like, you can't take a Segway on a bus or on a train. Like, it's so heavy. And like, they got reduced basically to like tour, to taking people around, touring people around cities.
Not near cliffs.
Not far away from cliffs.
Far away from cliffs.
Yeah.
So your point is that company did not do enough. They weren't design-led enough. They didn't talk to their customers enough. They didn't collaborate enough.
I think they understood that there was a need, but what they didn't do was actually understand, like, is this product going to sit in the real world?
Yes.
And if it's not, it's about the kind of reality of it. The sort of like the reality is like, oh, it'd be lovely if it did, but in actual reality, it wouldn't, because it didn't think about, like.
But I think that's the echo chamber effect, isn't it? Right, inside like big companies, sometimes small companies, but a lot of the time big companies where. And for me, like design-led, like take designers out of it and take, your hipster like dress, flat white, sipping. By a sort of stereotype. I know I did. So take your stereotype of me out of the equation. Yeah. So take that out of the equation. And actually, for me, a design-led business is focusing purely on the users. And to focus on the user, you have to speak to them. And you can't just ask them what they want, because that's why focus groups are utter crap.
Yeah.
Because if you ask somebody what they want, they tell you a load of stuff and probably won't use it. Right? Nobody knows what they want until they've got it. I will not use the Henry Ford metaphor because it's so overused, but it is that kind of thing. It's if you ask somebody what they want, but they don't understand that there's another way to kind of connect a solution, then they can't tell you. And for me, a design-led company is, and they do this internally and externally, but it's about quickly trying stuff, eliciting feedback, be it internal or external, and then using that as a data point to move forward and come up with solutions that kind of really fit a bill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm guessing Segway probably didn't do that to a degree.
Yeah, no, they didn't. Unfortunately for Segway.
So, obviously, we've all worked with lots of big companies, and we've worked on lots of different types of products and services and different teams.
Correct.
What are the perceived values that you've had? So it's Matt's quiz time here, right? But it's internal quiz time.
Drop the quiz B.
What are, John?
Yes.
The perceptions, the quiz B.
Quiz B.
John, what are the perceptions that you've had of design that you've personally experienced inside businesses?
I think the perceptions of design that I've come across is very much, it's like we mentioned at the very start, the colouring in bit, so many occasions where that is, and John can back me up here, where it's just like, it's very much, you're treated as a tool. You're just a piece of kit, who does that bit on the design. And we obviously, when we've been working together, we've always been pushing to get more in on the action, like speak to more users, do that sort of stuff. Plenty of times we've had people using like, oh, just do a bit of that design magic on it. It's just that perception of design as like at the end of the process, you know, before it goes for build or whatever, or whatever it is, you know, just do that design thing, you know, thank you very much. Oh, that looks good, you know, pass it off. So
it's not, I don't.
John, what about you?
Totally agree. I think, you know, I've had many instances where I've been told very similar to John to just work my magic. And I think that comes though, obviously it's about it's an education thing. I think it is that it's a stereotype in my mind of like what a designer is and what a designer does. And, I think from our perspective, that's another reason why it's so important to actually educate people that design shouldn't be like pigeonholed into this specific thing that is actually much bigger than that. And we deserve every right to be at the table as other people within your organization because we can bring some real value that's not just pigeonholed into coloring in.
Yeah. It's that bigger picture stuff of like, I think it's the problem I've got is the word design, because as soon as you say design, you just think something is designed, you know, it's the way something looks. And it's a shift in that mindset of actually you're talking about more than that. You're talking about the process of like creative problem solving and coming to solutions and you know, meeting challenges together and working through them. That's the bigger picture of design, of which the aesthetic element of that is one part, but it's only one part.
Yeah, I suppose that's where design thinking, why that kind of came into play, isn't it?
It's still got design at the beginning of it, and I think that's, you know, it's just that, yeah, it's a slight kind of stigma.
We think, people!
We think, man! We don't just do!
I don't know. What would you say, Matt?
Yeah.
What would your perceived value be of that?
I guess a lot of the time, I'm trying to think of past projects where I've had like these types of issues. I think in some regards, sometimes designers have sort of done it to themselves and pigeonholed them into that place. Whereas if they're selling a piece of work in, that they're not explicitly selling the value of design up front. So for example, a lot of design studios will sell their work based on lots of slides of really pretty application designs and pages of websites and things like that, which in my mind, and by the way, I've got my hands up, I've been guilty of this in the past.
So it's the output rather than the benefit of what you've done.
Exactly.
Like
it's the artifact, right? And then it becomes very easy to, okay, well, you paint beautiful UIs. And that's fundamentally what people see in their eyes. I think I've been quite fortunate to work on stuff where design has been more about really exploring from a user point of view what users are trying to achieve and what the business is trying to achieve. But at the same time, very much had those kind of same conversations with people where it's like, okay, cool. Well, now can we just make this look good? I mean, remember when we started bringing wireframing into stuff a few years back, many years back now. And, you know, again, this is where the education isn't done. And it's normally a frustration on our side where we show people wireframes and they go, oh, but it's not going to look like that, is it?
Yeah.
And it's very easy at the time to go, oh, and just like idiots, what's wrong with them? And I think actually it means that I haven't done my job properly and I haven't explained properly why we're going through this process. And the time I do that, then you obviously start to get the buy-in. But people are fundamentally scared of stuff they don't understand a lot of the time. And I think it is about less being a rock star designer, like the Johnny Ive that comes in and designs it. Number one, is a lie, right? There's not one person that designs any of those massive products that you see. It's a team of people that work together, right? So that's fundamental. Yeah. And it's not even just a team of designers, because I saw a really interesting documentary on like Ford Mustangs, for example, right? So,
lovely car.
Anyway. But you look at like where they start with the concept design, right? And that would be your car designer, which is like the cream of designers. And they sit in this lovely little design studio in
corner office.
Oh, yes, very nice. And
glass walls.
And there's a concept, and that's the concept and the story that's sold in for the product, right? That product gets buy-in, and then that goes through a round of different designs, which normally involve every aspect of the business, from logistics to manufacture to the engineers. And then right at the end of the process, there's like a part on the car that costs $1 extra, right? To do it that way. Or do we save $1 on a run of 50 million, 10 million cars, which saves $10 million? And it's really interesting, once you get to the bottom of it, that you can't actually design in isolation. You can't just sketch out an amazing concept and not involve the rest of the business. And I think fundamentally, again, hands up, that's where the arrogance of designers can sometimes come in. And I include myself in that as well. That we feel that we can come up with this great solution, but unless you get everybody involved, I really don't feel you can, because it's not realistic. It's not realistic scale to deliver.
Yeah, and that comes back to
how are you going to sell it? How are you going to market it?
Yeah.
How are you going to fund it? How are you going to track the metrics in it? How are you going to gain revenue from it?
Yeah.
It's how's your people inside your business going to utilize it?
Yeah. So if you know the value of design, if you're on the same page as the pack, how in the hell do you start selling it in? So interesting topic. Number one, I would say, is stakeholder analysis. Those damn stakeholders are telling you to colour stuff in. You need
What's
to...
stakeholder analysis? Explain stakeholder analysis to me, John.
Well, Matthew, it's basically working out who your stakeholders are and where they are on their journey to design enlightenment.
Halos above the head.
So again, just to kind of break it down, stakeholders, you mean like different people inside the business?
Stakeholders, right? Yeah. So different people within the business who have influence. So you've got people of influence on your product, on your project, on your whatever your service design, whatever you're doing. So you'll always have different stakeholders. Those people who they may not be like sleeves rolled up, working hard on the projects, on the product, whatever, but they have an invested interest, whether that's like, because they have to, or whether they are genuinely interested in it, or whether they're just out to...
Or signing it off as well,
Signing it off, or just out to trip you up, whatever, it's just like, there's all kinds of different stakeholders that you can get. And it's an important thing. Before you can sell in the value of design, it's important to know who those people are. So I have a little list of stakeholder types. And this is
John's list of stakeholders.
Oh yeah. It's a jingle for everything. So different stakeholders that you can have. Here's just a few that we can talk through. So champions. We've got champions who are influential partners who can help drive scalable adoption of design. So they are on your side, right? They see the value, they're backing you, right? Challengers. So influential partners who may be skeptical of your design type language.
Ooh, I hate it.
Tricky ones. Sidekicks. So partners willing not psychic.
I got excited then.
Sidekicks.
Sidekicks.
SIDEKICKS. Sidekicks. Partners willing to experiment with something new and willing to forgive if the experiment does not go as planned. So, they're not champions, but they're willing to give it a try. That is sidekicks, for clarity.
And who else?
Who else, John?
Say-nos. So say-nos, people who just say no.
Whatever. Very frustrating.
Sounds like a campaign.
They have a perception of design and what it should be. And if you're pushing for this kind of wider umbrella of design thinking and design doing, they're the ones who will probably, already think that they know what the process is and how you should do it, and are going to be extremely hard to...
So that's interesting.
Twist their arm.
Because that's obviously one that I think, whatever it is, if it's design or whatever you're doing, you're always going to come across people like that in business that necessarily feel comfortable with the way things are and want to instinctively say no to a big change, which, bringing a design-led approach into the business is a big change in mindset. How do you deal with the say no's?
How do you deal with them?
How would you do that, Dom?
Well, I think
Because you
I
must.
think change by its very nature is something that everyone finds difficult, and anyone who's had any kind of like personal interruptions in their life can, I'm sure, adhere to that. But in an organization, obviously it's slightly different because there's obviously a lot more of an impact that can come with change. And obviously that could be financial or to the company itself. So I think, in terms of like getting on board those no sayers, it does come down to like, getting them, talking to them, on a one-to-one level, I think. So not being afraid to go to them. Don't do it in a group scenario. Go and talk to them, like interview them, really find out what their fears are and their pain points and why, they're struggling with, it being an issue. And I think by understanding where they're coming from on a kind of personal level, it's much easier to start to get them on board because you can start to address some of those fears and concerns that they might have.
Definitely don't do what I did one time in a project, which is literally just attack them like a big bulldozer to the point where a product manager actually had to say, you're going to have a meeting with this guy because we need to move forward with this project.
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice. I think
you don't want to butt heads, do you? And
I don't want to butt heads. It's good to challenge, but I think, like you say, I think a lot of the time people have problems and sometimes don't necessarily express them in that way. But yeah, I think don't butt heads, and actually they have a problem and that's why they've come. They have a problem, but they might not want to talk to it or express it. So I think like the way you described is just perfect, and I've seen it work really well like that.
Yeah, because not everyone. Sorry, but not everyone obviously is capable of delivering what they truly mean or what they truly think. They're not.
That's
they're not
interesting.
very
Yeah,
emotive
that's what I was going to say. Is that sometimes they might not. You say potato, I say potato. Yeah, they might not be understanding.
Do you say potato?
I say potato. Yeah,
Wow.
Give me some mashed
Potato salad, please.
I might start saying it like that. Though. I like it.
Can we turn that off? They may not be talking the same language as you. There might just be something lost in translation, and I think that's part of getting to know your stakeholders, getting to know who your allies are. Who may be, maybe the only reason they're allies compared to a no-sayer or a challenger is because they understand what you're talking about. They understand the vocabulary of what you're talking about. And maybe those people who are more resistant just don't get it. So the thing is on you, if you want to sell in design within your organization, you have to learn their language and you have to speak in their language and you have to make design a measurable thing. You have to think about the return on investment and you have to think about how it affects things more than just, oh, do you like my design? Isn't it pretty? Because if you don't do that, you are really devaluing design.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think with the no-says as well, it's like, it's hard to ask for help sometimes. And that can be a barrier to getting in. And I think sometimes even if you go into, if you work in a business where people are scared of this type of change or don't want to implement this type of stuff, you can find smaller projects and then you can show the value. Because funnily enough, some of the people that have said no in the past, once they start to see the value it delivers and actually how it makes their life easier and how it can take them sometimes out of isolation inside a company and show their value in the wider area, that it really, they become your biggest evangelists.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, those people who hate you kidding.
Yeah, exactly. And then all
really
of a sudden they're like, wow, like this is, and they almost champion it themselves. And I think that in itself can be a big catalyst to change when people start to see internally how mindsets can change and how results can change and how you can make design. And I'm doing a Dr. Evil at the moment, design into something that can have a quantitative, measurable kind of impact.
Exactly. So what are some techniques for talking their language?
That's a great question, John.
What are some techniques for talking their language? And, so we've talked a little bit about what design is, in a wider sense. We talked a little bit about who you've got to sell it to, what their perceptions might be of design. And then, it's interesting just to have a little think about how you can get people on your side who might be skeptical about design.
Skeptical. What are your top techniques for driving home design inside an organisation.
Yeah, how can you sell it in? How can you get people on board and get build that momentum?
Physical.
I think some of that comes down. Obviously, you've got to try and sell that value, and haven't you? And the way people think about that can come from, obviously there's the one element we were talking about in terms of like convincing stakeholders. It's important understanding their needs, like the business value and all of that stuff. Really understanding what the customer needs are, which we've spoken about. But I think the majority of that comes in terms of the.
You're doing a recap.
I'm doing a recap. No, I'm going to bring it together.
Okay.
So we've got the business, we've got the customer, but ultimately, like in terms of delivering that to a team, it's the best way to do it is through storytelling, I think, and like really trying to build like a narrative around it that people can understand. And it's the same in research. It's like if someone goes away and does a bunch of research, data. It's not about coming back with like a giant report of research, because that is just like
that sometimes can be the worst thing you can do.
That's the worst thing that you can do, and it's not, and it isn't. Yeah, and you've got the qualitative and the quantitative data in there, and it's all meaningful and all the data there is,
all the types of data.
But trying to bring that back and trying to sell that in is like near impossible. So in order to do that, you have to try and be able to pitch it in a way that's relatable, and storytelling often is the best way to do that, because people, if you make it relatable to them, then they can understand it, and you make it relatable to the business.
Humans love stories as well, don't they?
I was going to say, back to what John was saying earlier, I think like, especially if you're a designer in the business, you kind of have to learn that just doing a great design isn't going to be enough. Like you were saying before, and it's quite funny how you said it as well, that, you show the design, look at my design. And that is like every designer. You show your design and then you're like, oh my God, please like it.
Please like it. Put so much work into it.
And then obviously what will happen is you'll get feedback about the one thing that's wrong and no mention of the stuff that's right. Designers basically just have to learn how to interact with other people, collaborate in a way that they can give it back in the form of a narrative and a story that matters to them, and not just to what the designer wants to see. Because it is about, how do you make it matter to that person in, a different product team that isn't really, involved in this? Or how do you make it matter to the people in marketing and brand? Or how do you make it matter to the C-suite? And I think when you can show that value and position it in a way that it becomes engaging and valuable, then other people will pick it up and champion it, and they'll tell the same story. That's all it is. A big group of people is all just telling stories to each other.
Exactly. Yeah. We are hardwired since caveman days, to sit around campfires and tell stories to each other. It's how we learn. If you think about when you're a kid, every single night, you get stories read to you. People just respond to that, and you need to build a story around the design. And as we design with our design-led approach, we build artifacts, don't we? Of which, the actual kind of shiny design bit is one artifact, but the other artifacts are, stuff like the personas that you build up and the insights that you build up, and how you weave that narrative could make or break whether you get design buy-in from the wider, stakeholder team and organization as a whole, and whether you can transform it into a design-led business or not.
And I think with us as well, like obviously we focus a lot on purpose, and that is a great way of bringing narrative back in, because if you can align around a purpose and you can weave those stories into that, then obviously that just, again, it's kind of reinforcing what you're trying to do and making sure everybody's aligned behind it, which you should have from the beginning.
Exactly.
I concur.
And I think...
what about validating and sharing off it? That's something that needs to come into it.
Yeah.
We talked about that a lot.
I think the validation side of things, you can't go into that like design silo and the kind of big reveal, which is like what
what's
we
it like in there, Dom? Check
it. Dom lives in this silo.
Dom doesn't live in the silo. Dom is so anti-silo.
He would love to, but we don't let him. But it's that.
Give me a room and leave me alone.
It's not happening. It goes back to what we were saying about that kind of big reveal moment of, oh, do you like my design? It's like, that insinuates that you've been in a silo doing your design thing, right?
Exactly,
and then you've revealed it, and you are looking. It's almost like those people haven't gone on that journey with you. Yeah. So you have to take those people on the journey, and the way to do that is show what you're working on, show the importance of it, show the measurable benefits where you can on, the bottom line. understand with empathy, why it might matter to other people within the business that aren't so wrapped up in the design or maybe don't understand so much about the design, why it's important for them that it needs to go out the door by this time and maybe, they don't have all the time in the world to do the collaborative design stuff and users, and what compromises can you make as well?
Oh, that's the worst one. That's like my biggest bugbear. Is everyone wants to be user focused, and then no one wants to talk to user. The number of companies I speak to, we want to be user led. Okay, cool. Let's test some stuff on some users. We can't talk to. We're a big B2B because we can't talk to our users about this. They might not like it. And the worst thing about that is, John was just talking about bringing people along the journey, right? The biggest weapon that you have in your arsenal is your customers' opinions. So if you can test stuff and you can elicit feedback and then use that as part of your narrative to send them back into the business, nothing is going to move you in that direction quicker.
Oh my God, it's so important. I find it so bizarre though that companies don't do that. We've come in, we've worked with a few as well that have said that exact same thing, like, you can't talk to them. And you can't even talk to people who are like your target audience either. It's like,
are they afraid it's going to derail their hard work? Are they too precious over it? And I think this, don't be precious over the design. Don't be precious over what you're doing. Like, at the end of the day, if those people don't like it and people aren't going to buy it,
it's probably good to find out early, right?
Yeah. It's good to find it.
Don't be segue, basically.
Talking about it's good to know, right? It's good to know. So don't be precious. As a advocate of design, whether you're a designer, whether you're a product manager, whether you're this, whether you're that, and you believe that design has a value, like, don't hold on to it yourself. Like, share the load. Like, make sure that there's some group accountability. If you can convert some of those stakeholders into advocates of your process, into advocates of what the way that you want to do things, then get them to share some of that load and get behind you, and the way that you do, like we say, is to show them the value of what you're doing, tell that story, get that shared vision, nailed.
Empower everyone. Don't be a design arsehole, fundamentally.
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole.
But it sounds silly, but don't be a design arsehole. And that could go for any profession, but don't stick yourself in that silo. Don't make it all about you doing it and saving it. If you bring people along on the journey and you collaborate, bring people together, empower them through the different techniques that you have in your tool belt, you're going to end up with better products. You're going to end up with a much easier process of getting it through. And everybody's going to be happier, from the customer to your team to your C-suite.
I love it. And guys, I've got some mind-blowing stats about design thinking.
Oh, he's got a stat.
Dumb stats.
Now, there is a lot here, but I'm just going to read a few as opposed to
all the stats.
Can you wrap them?
I can wrap them up because there's 15 mind-blowing stats here, but I thought perhaps I'd just read a few.
I don't want to
blind.
I don't want to rap it.
Yeah,
like Dr. Dre.
Oh, what, like actual rap?
Like, there was a design team.
Oh God, I don't think I'll be able to do it justice. John's the rapper here. You rap them out.
They're not my stats.
Once upon a time, about 10% ago.
Yeah,
oh, that would be amazing. I wish I could, but I won't. I'll just read them if that's all right with you guys. Design-led firms consciously put the customer first, with 46% of design leaders citing an emotional bond with customers as a defining characteristic of an advanced design practice. So that's interesting. That's sort of saying that almost 50% of companies are actually taking customer research on board and their customers.
We're not laughing at your stats.
Oh. What are you laughing at?
We're laughing at your stats.
Oh. Hey, leave my stats alone.
It's just jargon.
It's not jargon. That's why I was explaining it.
Tell me a story.
If we're saying that nearly 50% there of design-led companies are actually seeing that there is a benefit from including their customers, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good thing.
I think that's a pretty good stat. I mean, how many of these are actually real? Who knows? But we're going to read through them.
How many more we got to go, Tom?
14 more to go.
71% of organizations that practice design thinking report that it improved their working culture on a team level.
You see, now that is a biggie. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
So this
is more tangible than the first one.
This is by Adobe.
Adobe.
It's actually interesting. just from reading through it, just to see.
Cool. Drop us another stat. We'll be
I'm
the
gonna-
judge.
50% of design-led companies report more loyal customers as a benefit to having advanced design practices.
Nice. I've got a stat for you as well, Dom, actually.
Go on, give me a stat.
3 out of 3 directors of PAC guarantee you that if you introduce design-led thinking into your business, it's going to be unimaginably
Amazing! Unimaginably great. I've got a stat.
Go on.
74% of Dom's stats are absolute gold.
Well, that's all right. I've got a bit of a percentage now. I've got a bit of leeway.
You've got a 26% margin
This is what happens when you try and come up with stats whilst recording.
on the fly.
On
That's cool.
On
That's
the
all right.
fly stats.
That's all right. To be honest, man, I think
we're done.
we're done. I think
we're done.
I think the stats are good. I'm not taking anything away from the stats.
Leave my stats alone.
Leave my stats alone. I think maybe just pick out the best ones.
I would have done if I'd had a bit more time. They were on the fly stats.
But they were
I
very,
mean,
they
we
were very
definitely
good.
didn't look at each other and then nearly just fall asleep.
So,
But
guys,
this is the thing, they don't make when people put stats out, they could word them in a slightly better way, couldn't they?
Dom, drop a bomb and tell us why. Why?
Why? Just tell us why.
So hopefully we've given you a few ideas about how you can make your business a design-led business, how you can sell it in to the internal, stakeholders, and how you can use all kinds of different tools in your arsenal. At the end of the day, design is bigger than colouring in. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and it can just deliver so much value to your business as a whole, really holistically. It's not only going to make better products and services for your customers, it's going to make your team more collaborative. It's going to help people feel empowered and engaged, which is going to give them safe spaces to come up with the new ideas that hopefully are going to change the world.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, if you really care about that side of thing, which I'm sure most people do in businesses, it should, in theory, increase the amount of money you're making and give you that massive competitive advantage that you're looking for.
Yes, 100%.
I concur.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Guys, I thoroughly enjoyed that chat.
I
did
did.
too.
I thought it was great. Even the stats, I must admit, I thought that was the best bit.
That was the best stats.
I didn't hear any stats in this recording. Oh, I wonder if they're on the cutting room
Me
floor.
neither.
Leave my stats in. I want some music as well, please.
But
See what I can do.
yeah, I can't wait till it's next week.
Yeah. So I guess that just leaves to say, see you next Tuesday, guys.
See you next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.